In this example, we're going to show you how to create the model of the lioness that you can see here. We're going to start with some vectors that have been edited from some clip art kindly supplied to us from the website vectorart.com. We're going to focus purely on the modelling tools in this session, where we're going to work through using the create shape function to make the basic shapes for the lioness, and then we're going to finish off using the smoothing and the very powerful sculpting tools. So let's go to File, Close. So let's go and open up an existing file. So from the Lioness Files project folder, we're going to open up the Lioness vector file. So you'll see here that we've got a set of edited vectors that we edited using the drawing tools in the software. And so in this session we're going to focus purely on the 2D shapes. We're not going to do any vector drawing in this session, we're just going to look at these shapes and build them into a 3D model. To stay organised during the modelling process, we've actually organised the artwork into different layers. So if we come over to our layer manager at the top here, you'll see that we have 5 different layers and they all represent a different area of the lioness. So let's just toggle the visibility of these layers just by switching on the light bulbs. You'll see that we've got the tail layer, that represents the vector that represents the tail of the lioness. We've got the back leg layer, and this holds the back leg vectors for that lioness. We've got the body vectors, the front leg vectors, and we've got the head vectors. Now I'd like to work with one layer at a time, so I'm just going to switch these layers off. We're just going to leave the tail on for us to start our first component. Now I can see that the head layer is now red. The software's way of telling me that this is the active layer, but it's currently invisible. So if I click on the tail layer, we can see that's now the active layer there. So let's just click into the white space there. Now to access the modelling tools, we need to come down over to the modelling tab. Now that we organise our 2D information into layers, it's a good idea to get into the habit of organising potential 3D data into levels. And so you'll see in the component tree we have level 1 by default. I'm just going to right click here, we're going to rename this level to something more appropriate to the part that I'm going to create, and we're going to call this one tail. And any components that I create now will be added to this level. You can see that we'll only be creating one component, as we only have one vector that we're going to create that shape from. So now let's go ahead and tile our windows. We're going to tile our windows vertically, that way I can see the 2D view and the 3D view, and now we're ready to create our first shape. And so for all of the shapes that we're going to create in this session, we're going to use the modelling tool Create Shape. You can access that in the modelling tools. It's the first icon, and if we click in there, that will open up the Create Shape form. And in here, this is where we're able to specify a set of simple profiles, along with a variety of ways that we can control the shape that we create within the 2D region of any selected vector. And so we need to select the vector like so. So we've got the tail vector selected, and now what I'd like to do is I'd like to apply a rounded shape, as we're working with a natural form, and we're going to apply quite a steep angle on this just to give us a fairly well defined edge. So with that vector selected and we've got the curved profile selected, we then need to change the angle. So I could type in an angle value if I wanted to, or I could simply just use the slider bar, and you'll see it will update as soon as I let go of that slider. Okay, I'm just going to increase that a little bit more, make it around 80. Okay, and we can take a look at that in the 3D view, so let's just zoom in there. You can see it's quite a bulbous shape here, so I'm going to look at controlling this by scaling it to an exact height. Okay, we can see at 0.06 is a little bit too flat there, so let's try 0.2 and press apply. Okay, so I like the definition that we've got in there and the height that we've got in there. So now we could give this component a name. I'm going to call this one tail. And we could go ahead press apply, put that in ISO, and then we could just close that form down. We can see that component has now been added to our tail level in the component tree. We've got a 2D representation of that component in the 2D view, and then we can see the 3D component that we've created there in the 3D view. So now that we've finished with the tail, we can now think about modelling another area for the lioness. So let's come up to the layer manager at the top there. We're just going to switch the visibility of the tail layer off. You'll notice now that we've switched that off, we've actually lost the component grayscale that we had here in the 2D view, but we can still see the component here in the 3D view. The reason for that is what we see in the 3D view is managed by the component tree over on the left hand side here, and then any 2D grayscales is managed by the layer. So if I switch that back on, you'll see that we can see that again. So let's just turn that off. We're going to switch on the back leg, make that the active layer. Just going to click into the space there. And now that we're on the back leg layer, we're also going to look at creating a new level to organise our components. So let's right click on the tail level. We're going to insert a new level. We're going to right click on the newly created level 1. We're going to rename that level, and we're going to call this one back leg. And then click to accept that. We can see it's now the active level. Any components that I create now will be added to that level. So let's just select this vector here. I'm going to use this option to zoom selected objects. And so we're going to look at using the create shape again to create the back leg that we've got here. So this is going to form the base shape of that leg. So with that vector selected, let's come over to the create shape tool. Now you'll see here that the software remembers the settings that we used last time. Okay, now I'm happy to go ahead with these settings, so I'm just going to go and type in a name. I'm just going to call this one back leg base, and then press apply. We can see how that looks there. Okay, so if we just zoom in on the 3D view and just pan that view across, and then we could just close that down. So looking at the parts here in the 3D view, it's not quite the result that I was looking for. So we can see here we've got this overlapping area. So where the two components intersect or overlap each other, we've got this extra material that's adding on top. And the reason for that is all down to the combine modes that we've got set within our component tree. So let's just take a minute to discuss that. So the way our component tree works is we work from bottom up. So we created our first level, the tail level, and that currently has the tail component on it, which we can see there. And then we created a new level, which is the back leg level, and in that level we've got the newly created back leg base component. Now that back leg base component is sat in the back leg level, which is currently set to add. We can see the combine mode of that is set to add, so that's adding on top of the tail level. Now in order for these two components to blend into one another, what we need to do is we need to change the combine mode of the back leg level so that it's merging in with the tail level. So to do that, we simply right click on that back leg level, go to the combine mode, change that to merge. We can see now the two components are actually blending in with one another. Now I'd like to add some detail that's going to sit on top of this leg component that we've got here. But with our setup, everything will still merge in to our tail level. So let's just select this vector here. I'm going to hold down shift, and we're going to also select this vector here. We're going to come over to the create shape tool. Again, we're going to go with the same settings, set the combine mode of this to add, so it's adding on top of the leg base. And then if we just give that a name, we're going to call this one back leg detail. And then if we go ahead and press apply, can see how that looks there. Okay, now I think that's a little too strong, so I might want to just look at scaling this down a little, so I could look at using the slider if I wanted to, or I could just type in a precise value. So I'm going to put 0.15 in there, press spacebar to accept that, and I think that looks okay. So let's just close that down. And so we can see that newly created detail component that we've just created there is adding on top of the base leg, and those two components are both sat within a level that is merging or blending in to the tail level. And so you can see we're getting a nice merge between the two areas in our composite model there. So let's just put this in the Z view, and then we're just going to go into the 2D view and use the option there to zoom to fit. Now that we're done with the back leg, we're going to go to the layer manager, switch that off, switch on the body layer, make that the active layer, and again we're going to create a new level for the body. It's going to insert a new level, right click on level 1, rename the level, and we're going to call this one body. So any components that I create now will be added to this body level. And with that said, what we need to do is we need to change the combine mode of this level so it's merging with everything else that we've already built here. So let's right click, go to the combine mode, set that to merge. Now the shapes for this and the rest of the model will be repeating what we've already done. So let's just select the main body shape there. We're going to go into the create shape form. And we're going to go with the same settings here, except we're just going to up the height to 0.2. We'll give that component a name. We're going to call this one body base. Press apply. You can see that's added there. Then what we could do is we could go ahead and start a new component by using this option here. And I could select this vector here. Again, same settings, except this time what I would like to do is just decrease the height there to 0.15, and we're going to call this one body detail. Press apply. We can see it's been added there, and we can close that down. And so again, if we take a look at our component tree, we can see we've got two components that are adding on top of each other. That's these two here, this one and this one here, but they're ultimately on a level that's merging with previous levels before it. So let's go and look at the front leg. So go to the layer manager, switch off the body layer, switch on the front leg layer, make it the active layer there. I'm also going to do the same over in the components tree. Right click on the body level, insert a new level, right click on level 1, rename that level. We're going to call this one front leg. We're also going to set the combine mode of this level to merge, so that it merges with everything that we currently have here in our component tree. Okay, so I'm just going to select this vector here, use the option zoom selected view. There we go. So we're just going to select that vector, come over to the create shape tool. Okay, again we're going to go the same settings. Might want to increase the height of that to 0.2. Give that a name. We're going to call this one front leg base. Press apply. We can see how that's applied that in the 3D view there. Then we could go ahead and start a new component. We're going to look at the detail vectors. So we're just going to shift select these vectors that lie on the inside of that shape. And again we're going to go the same settings. Might want to decrease the height of that to 0.15, give that a name, front leg detail, and then we could go ahead, apply that. Okay, so you can see it's a little too bulbous here, so what I might want to do is look at decreasing that. So I could use the slider just to knock that down a little, so it's a little more subtle than what it was. Okay, so I like that, so we could just go ahead, apply that, and then we could just close that down. So let's now look at modelling the head of the lioness. So let's just use the option there to zoom to fit. We're going to go into the layer manager, switch off the front leg, switch on the head, make that the active layer, right click on the front leg, insert a new level, right click on that level, rename that level. We're going to call this one head, and then we're going to right click on that level. We're going to change the combine mode of this so it's set to merge. So then we'll go and select that vector, and we'll just zoom in on that vector there. We'll go into the modelling tab, create the shape, again same settings. This time we want to scale that to 0.2, give that a name. We're going to call this one head base, press apply. You can see that's been added there. You can start a new component, select this vector here. Again, same profile, same angle, except this time we're going to reduce the height down to 0.15, set the combine mode to add, give that a name. We're going to call this one head detail, press apply. Okay, we can see it's been added there. And it's quite bulbous, quite rounded, so you might want to just knock the height back a little, so you could bring that down to 0.1, space to enter that in. We might want to do that a little bit more, so we could just look at using the slider. Okay, and that seems to have done the trick there. We're still hinting at all the detail. So we could just simply close that down, and we could maximise the 3D view there. So there we can see we've got a set of shapes that form the lioness. My model is organised in the component tree. We've got a series of levels, and we also have all of our parts on various layers. It just makes it easier for me to switch between the layers to create all of the different parts that form the entire lioness. Now, looking at the overall part, what I would like to do is I'd like to make the back and the front leg a little bit more prominent, so it sticks up a little bit more compared to the shapes that currently surround them. And so what we want to do is we want to look at applying a tilt, where we're going to tilt them both up from the bottom to the top there. And we can make all of these adjustments here in the 3D view. So to select the component I'd like to tilt, I could go ahead and select it from the component tree, or I could just simply right click using the mouse button over this area of the leg, and you'll see that we're displayed all of the components that are below the cursor when I clicked. In this case, I want to access the back leg base component, so I'm going to click on that. You'll see it's now selected. I'm going to select it again, and you'll see now that we're in transform mode. So I could rotate it, I could scale it, I could move it if I wanted to. Now I don't want to do any of these. All I want to do is access the properties. So you see this blue square at the bottom. If I click on that, that will open a small properties form, and here I can alter the height, I can add base heights, I can change the combine modes. As I said, what I'd like to do here is look at applying a tilt. So we're going to use the tilt option, so we're going to check that, and then we're going to set our anchor point. You'll see my cursor's now changed to an anchor, and it's got a number 1 next to it. This is where I need to specify my first anchor point. So this is the area that you want to start your tilt from. In this case, we want to start from the foot of the leg, so we're just going to click somewhere around here. And with that clicked, you'll see I now have a number 2 next to that anchor, in which case I need to now specify where I'd like to apply my tilt. Now we want to go from this bottom area here up in this direction here, so I'm just going to click the top here like so. So now what we need to do is we need to apply an angle, and if we just use this slider, you'll see that will increase that, and if we just tilt our view, you can see that that is far too much tilt applied there, and so we need to look at just reducing that down. So let's just come back to the slider. I'm going to come down, let's take it to about 1 degree. Might want to increase that. Let's go up an increment of 0.2 and press space to enter that in, and I can see that's just lifted that nicely there. So let's just put that in Z, and then what we can do is we can look at tilting the right leg. So over here we're just going to use the right mouse button, Okay, so again you'll see it's now found the front leg base component and the body base component. Here I want to access the front leg base component, and you'll see it's selected, it's in transform mode, and now my properties form has now updated according to the component that we've now selected. So let's just move that form over here. Again, we're going to apply a tilt, so check tilt, we're going to set that, we're going to go from the bottom here, and we're going to choose our second anchor point, which is going to be somewhere around here, and then when we click that in place, we need to apply the actual angle of the tilt. So let's go with, say, 1 degree. Okay, that's just lifted that up nicely there, and then what we could do is we could just close that form down. And so we could continue to edit the shapes at this stage if you needed to. In this case, I'm fairly happy with what we've got here, so we're going to look at moving on now. Now, so that you have a copy of the project in this state, we're actually going to save this file. So we're going to go to File, Save As, and in the Project folder, we're going to call this one Lioness Basic Model 3D Modeling. Press save, and then you can access that from the project folder. So now we're going to start sculpting the lioness. So if you wanted to, you could load this basic model file into the software to follow along. Now this is an important transitional stage because we're going to go from being able to work with individual components where we can select them and we can edit them like we did earlier, to needing to join the components together so that they act as a single object that will allow me to work with them much more organically. And so to do this, we're going to look at creating a component based on everything that we can see here in the 3D view. That way I'll still have access to all of the individual parts and levels that make up the overall composite model here. So to do this, we're going to right click on the head level, insert a new level, right click on level 1, rename that level, and we're going to call this level Combined Model. And we'll just click to accept that, and with that the active level, we're going to come over to the modelling tools, and we're going to use this icon here, create component from visible model, and it's this that will create a component based on what we can see here in the 3D view. So if we click that, we'll see that a component's now been created. We can see that there in the 3D view. So if I just right click on this level, you'll see here we've got the option to show. Let's say show only this, and you'll see we just have one individual component there that represents all of those components that we had in view in the 3D view earlier. So let's right click on that component, we're going to rename that, and we're going to call this one Lion to Edit. And then this is the component that we're going to look at sculpting. So creating a component from visible model just means that we can just edit the complete version, but yet we still have access to all of the individual parts if you wanted to come back to those at a later date. So now we're going to look at applying a general smooth over the entire lioness, just to blend out some of the sharp edges. And then we're going to go in with the sculpting tools to be much more specific about our edits. So to smooth a model, we have the model selected, and then we come over to the modelling tools, and we're going to use this option here to apply a smooth filter to the selected components. And so by default the software will smooth that 50%. You can see it's a little bit too harsh in some areas. We've lost a little bit of detail in the paw and in the head. So I'm just going to look at reducing that. So I'm just going to take the slider, move that down somewhere around a quarter of the way, and you can see it automatically update there in the 3D view. It's also worth noting I do have preserve transparency on, and the reason that I've got that on is that when I apply the smooth, I don't want the smooth to blend from my model into the modelling plane. So then we could go ahead and press OK to accept that. So now we're ready to further edit the lioness by using the sculpting tools. So we need to select the component we want to sculpt, and then come over to the modelling tools, and we're going to use the option here, Sculpt Visible Model, and that's going to put it into sculpt mode. And so in the form we have 5 different ways that we can interact with the model. We have an option here to adjust the view that we're working in. We then have 3 sliders here that allows us to adjust the diameter, the strength or the smoothness on whatever tool that we've selected up here. And then we've got some additional options at the bottom there. So to use the sculpting tools, you need to choose an option or a tool that you'd like to use. In this case, we're just going to use the smooth option for now. Then you specify a diameter, so I could use a slider here, I could just increase that, maybe increase the strength if I wanted. We're just going to go with these settings for the time being. And then if I bring my cursor over into the 3D view, you'll see that my cursor is now a circle, and this circle represents the diameter of the tool that I'm using. And if I bring my cursor over my model, you see that we're not actually making any changes here, and that's because we haven't activated the smooth tool. So to activate it, we simply press the left mouse button down. You'll see now it's changed colour, it's now red colour, it's telling me that we have now activated the smooth tool. And so if I come over to my model, still holding the left mouse button down, you'll notice now that we're actually blending or smoothing material together. I'm just going back and forth, and that will just smooth that out. And sculpting will only have an effect when clicking the mouse and moving it. So you could think of this action being similar to using sandpaper. Now, if you wanted to stay in the 3D view and you still wanted to change your tools, rather than come into the form and selecting a new option, you'll notice that each of these tools has a number next to it, and this number is the keyboard shortcut key to access the various tools. For example, if I wanted to access Smudge, I could press 2 on the keyboard and you'll see it's changed there. 3 for deposit, 4 for remove, 5 to undo, and 6 to twiddle my view. So let's just put that back to 1 for the smooth option. We also have shortcuts to access the diameter and the strength of the tool that you're using. So on the keyboard, if you press the right arrow key, that increases your diameter, left arrow key decreases that, up arrow key increases the strength of the tool, down arrow key decreases the strength. So not only can we use the keyboard shortcuts to alter the diameter or the strength, but we can use the wheel on the mouse as well. For example, if I push the wheel of my mouse away from me, that increases the diameter of the tool that I'm using. If I pull it towards me, it decreases the diameter of the tool. Now if I hold down Shift whilst scrolling the mouse, now if I scroll that away from me, that increases the strength, and if I bring that back to me, that decreases the strength. So there's lots of ways for us to control the use of the tools whilst remaining in the 3D view. So now what I'd like to do is blend together the edges of the model using the smooth brush. So I'm just going to use the up arrow key just to increase my strength to around 40. Diameter, we'll keep it at this diameter of 69 here. And then all I'm going to do is just go over the edges and just going back and forth and just blending those edges together. So you can see we're making nice subtle changes there. I just keep going round, and you can see that we're just blending in all of those areas so we don't have any of those harsh lines. Okay, now I don't want to go over the internal detail too much in this area. I'd like to keep some of that in place. Just go around the edge of the head there, and all I'm doing is just going back and forth with my mouse. So my left mouse key is constantly held down whilst I'm going around the edge of this model, just blending the material together. This is just very small, subtle changes here, but you can see we've got a nice, much nicer, much smoother looking part. I'll just come over to the top over here. Okay, so you can see we're starting to make some nice changes here. Just going to go over this area here, come back over to the neck, around the back here, blend these two areas together. Now for areas like this, we may want to look at increasing your diameter or increasing the strength. So in this case, we're just going to up our diameter, just using the right arrow key until I think we've got something that looks reasonable. Okay, so around 100, we're going to go with that. And then for the strength, we're going to go, just knock that up ever so slightly to around 50 using the up arrow key. And then here, we're just going to look blending these two areas together again along the top up here. So again, all I'm doing is just going back and forth just to smooth those shapes out, but still retain the look of the muscle there in the lion. Do the same over here, so just going to blend that back and forth and come in at the top there, over here. Okay, so just smoothing it out until we get a nice, more natural transition between these different areas. Now sculpting is something that you really get a feel for, and it requires quite a lot of practice to become pretty proficient with it. Now in this case, I'm actually using a mouse to sculpt this lioness that we can see. If you're really serious about sculpting, then I'd highly recommend using a tablet and pen, as it gives you a little bit more control over the movements that you have when you are manipulating the material in the sculpt mode. So we've looked at smoothing some of the edges. Now I want to look at using the smudge tool. Now the smudge tool allows me to drag material from high to low areas, and low to high. And we're going to look at sculpting in some detail into the tail using the smudge tool. Before we go into the smudge tool, I'd just like to zoom in on the tail area. So the safest way for me to do this is to go into the Twiddle View. That way I can't make any changes to my model whilst we're still in the smooth mode. Okay, so to zoom in, I could just simply use the scroller of my mouse, and then if I hold both mouse keys down, I can pan my view. Now we could just look at zooming in again. Okay, so that seems pretty close up there. So now I need to go into the smudge tool. So here I'm just going to reduce the diameter. Might help if I actually view it here and use the left arrow key to decrease the diameter there. I'll just bring that down. 30 seems to be okay, maybe a little less. And then for the strength, we're going to increase the strength here just to around 50. We'll keep the smoothness at 70 there. And so with the smudge tool, we're going to look at pushing material from low to high just to create the detail in the tail. So I'm just going to start by clicking into the space here, so you can see I've activated smudge just by pressing the mouse key down, and I'm just going to push material like so. So you can see we're starting to get some detail there. Do the same again for this one here, so just going to push in material, and then what I could do is we could come out, so we're dragging it now from high to low, and again here like so. If I wanted to be a little bit more aggressive, I could increase the strength. So we could look at increasing the strength. I want to just increase the diameter also. And then we could just look at bringing that up and then pulling that back. And you see now we're getting the detail of that tail. Okay, so I quite like what we've got there. If I wanted to, I could just smudge over some of these areas, or smooth even, so we're going to use the smooth option. Just going to smooth that, smooth over here. Okay, so I like the look of that. So then what we could do now is we could look at using the option here to zoom to the full view of our part. And then we're going to do the same for the paw here. So let's go into the Twiddle View, both mouse keys held down to pan my view, use the scroller just to zoom in there. I'm going to go into the smudge tool. Let's just try these settings for now, and here we're just going to pull material down from high to low just to fill the bottom area of the paw. And then I'm just going to decrease the diameter ever so slightly, and we're going to drag material from low to high just to give that a little bit more definition. I'm just going to increase that diameter and look at dragging material down again. Okay, so here you can see you can do as much or as little sculpting as you want to. It's very subjective matter here, so it's all dependent on how you like the look of the part. Okay, so I quite like what we've got there, so let's just go into the Twiddle View. We could zoom out, or I could press F to fit that to the screen. So let's do the same for this paw over here. So just going to pan the view and zoom in there. Use the Smudge tool. I just want to decrease the diameter and just decrease the strength a little there. And we're just literally going to drag material from high to low areas to create the detail in the paw. Okay, so you can see I'm just going back and forth, creating that detail in there, cutting in, pulling material from low areas to high areas, and then bringing it back just to shape it out. Okay, so as I said, this is very much a subjective process, and you can just sculpt as much as you like or as little as you like until you're happy with the actual result that you've got there. Okay, what I might want to do is just apply a little smooth over. I'm just going to reduce the strength down just to soften the edges that we've got here. I've smudged the paw detail. I just want to come over here just to soften that. Okay, so I quite like what we've got there, so let's go into the Twiddle tool, F to fit that to screen. Good tip here is if you like what you've got so far and you want to temporarily save the changes that you've made, if you press the keep button, that will do that. The software will temporarily save the sculpting in sculpt mode. So if I went ahead now and say I removed material accidentally or made some drastic changes, I could discard those changes, press yes, and it will just revert back to the last time that we pressed keep. So you'll see that we still have the sculpted paws, the tail and the smooth over on the entire lioness. So now what I'd like to do is look at blending the leg areas into the body, so this leg and this shoulder area. So to do that we're going to use the Smudge tool again, except this time we're going to use a much larger brush this time, so somewhere around 200, so a very big brush here. And then the strength, we're just going to really reduce that, so we're going to make that somewhere around 25, 27 will do. And then here all I'm doing is I'm just going to drag material back and forth like so, and you can see we're just blending that leg in with the actual body there. Okay, so with having the larger brush just means we cover a larger area, and the smaller strength that we're using just makes those subtle changes. Let's come over to the shoulder, so just go back and forth, just blending that shoulder into the body. I'll do the same over this area here. So I'm just going high to low, low to high, just to create a nice blend in there. I want to come back over here, just go back and forth till I'm happy with the way that it looks. Come over to the top of the shoulder there, and I just blend that into the back. Okay, once you're happy with the way that looks, Just might want to just reduce the strength down, just go over the top area here. And then once we're finally happy, we could just help ourselves by pressing keep just to accept those changes. So now we're going to look at the face area. So let's go to the Twiddle View, pan our view and just zoom in on the heads there. And we're going to go into the Smudge tool. And the first thing that I'd like to do is just look at removing all of these creases that we have. And these creases were created from the odd shape that we created for the head detail. So let's just look at reducing the diameter down. So just judging by eye here. Okay, so around 50 seems to be okay. Let's just increase the strength there, around 30. And I'm just going to go back and forth. And I'm literally just getting rid of those creases that we created from using the Create Shape tool. Okay, so we've got rid of those creases there. So now what we can do is we can look to create the detail. So we can look at just really highlighting this jawline here. So I'm just going to look at reducing the diameter down, so using the left arrow key just to reduce that. And then I want to increase the strength to around 40. And then here we could just simply look at dragging material down. I want to increase that diameter just to really push that jawline in place. Bring that back over here. So you can see we're really highlighting it there. Okay, so you can see what I've done there. I've actually gone in and created that crease. So what I can do is I can press Control Z and you'll see that Control Z just undoes the last strokes that I created with that brush. That's a good tip to remember there. Okay, then I'm going to look at the nose area here. So I'm just going to increase the diameter. I'm just going to look at dragging that down just to highlight this area over here. And we'll do the same for the nose here. I want to push that back a bit just to give it a bit more of a nose shape in there, so it's a little bit stronger. Again, we'll just pull on this shape here. Yeah, I might want to just pull that back as well. I'll just reduce the strength here. Just go back and forth. Okay, so I quite like what we've got there so far. So then what we could do is we could look at this eye area here. So just going to blend that area in, and then I'm just going to reduce the strength down. I just want to push this up like so, just to give us more of a crease or more shape or definition in this sort of brow area. So again, what I might want to do is just reduce the diameter, increase the strength. We're just going to push material over to create the look of that brow there. Do the same for the cheek here. Again, I might want to increase the diameter of my brush there. I'm just going to push that in just to give that a little bit more definition, like so. Now I just want to pull that away also. Okay, so I quite like what we've got there. Just going to decrease the diameter, and we're just going to soften this line that we've got here. Bring that in and around. And then we're just going to look at adding in an eye. So we could look at using the deposit tool here. I'm just going to reduce the diameter of my brush, and I'm just simply going to just press that in, and you can see we've created an eye shape there. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is I'd just like to keep those changes that we've created. So now I would like to look at the ear, and we're going to look at removing material to hollow out the inside of the ear shape. So we're going to use the remove tool. Okay, so here we're just going to look the diameter, Okay, so around 40 seems to be okay. Strength, we're just going to reduce that down, put it to around 30 so it's not too harsh. And then we're just simply going to draw in hollow areas that will form the inside of the ear. Okay, so something like that seems to be okay. And so now we can look at smudging the detail to create more of an ear shape. So let's use the smudge tool here. So here we'll go to the settings we've got. I might want to just decrease the strength there. And then we're just going to push the material to create that outer ear shape. Okay, so I'm just pushing. I want to just increase that strength. Okay. Pulling that up, and you can see we're forming that ear shape at the top there. I'm going to blend in the area where the head actually comes and meets the ear. Okay, and again, you really need to get a feel for sculpting. It all comes down to practice. There isn't really a substitute here other than just getting practice in to get better at the whole sculpt process. Okay, so I quite like what we've got there. So what I can do is I'm just going to go into the smooth tool, very low strength. I'm just going to go over this area here and just go around the edge of the nose there. Then we're going to look at blending the head into the neck area. I might want to use a smudge tool, very low strength, high brush, and just put a little blend in there. Okay, once I'm happy with that, I could go ahead and press keep. So let's just press F on the keyboard to fit that to the screen, and we can take a look at the part as a whole. Okay, so I quite like what we've got there. I might just want to do one final thing, and that's just go in on the internal areas and just apply a very small amount of smoothing. So I'm going to use the Twiddle tool just to zoom in on the areas there. I'm just going to use a smooth option, very small strength. I'm just going to go over these areas just to soften those lines out. And then again back into the twiddle and move over to the left hand side, zoom in, back into the smooth, and just come over the leg area here using a very small strength just to create the very subtle difference there. Okay, so let's just use the Twiddle View, press F to fit that to the screen, and you can see we've got the completed lioness there. So I could press keep, put that in Z, then we could go ahead and press OK. And so I could continue to sculpt the lioness, as this is an iterative process and is very much subjective. So it's a case of continuing to sculpt until you're happy with the way that your model looks. In this case we are. So at this stage it would be a good idea to save the file. So let's go to File, Save As, and we're going to call this one Lioness_3D modeling. Press save, and then you can access that from the project folder.